adding and subtracting positive and negative fractions. Before we proceed, let us try to review the rules in adding numbers. The first rule is adding numbers with same signs. Remember, the first step is to add the absolute values of the numbers, or you can think of it as if you're ignoring the signs and you keep the same sign. For example, we have negative 1/5 plus negative 2/5. If you notice in our given now, they are both negative numbers. So, if they are both negative, we follow the rule that I've mentioned. You need to add the absolute value of each numbers. Okay. Now, the absolute value of negative 1/5 is 1/5, and the absolute value of negative 2/5 is 2/5. Now, if you notice, the two denominators that we have, they're both positive 5. That means that the two fractions that we are dealing with, they are like fractions. Or we also call them as similar fractions. If if the fractions that you are adding are like fractions, that means you just have to copy the common denominator and add the numerator. So 1 plus 2 is 3, and you have 5 in the denominator. So now the last step in our rule is to consider the signs, the common signs of the two numbers, which is negative. So our final answer is negative 3/5. Now, our second rule, when we add numbers with the different signs, you need to subtract the absolute values of the numbers and keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. For example, we have here negative 1/4 plus 1/8. So if you notice, the sign of the first number is negative while the other one is positive. That means we follow the rule that I have just mentioned. You get the absolute value of each number, but this time you need to subtract them. The absolute value of negative 1/4 is 1/4, and the absolute value of 1/8 is 1/8. Now, if you notice, this time we have different denominators. We call them as unlike fractions or dissimilar fractions. So what you need to find here, you need to figure out the LCD, or the least common denominator, or from your previous lesson in grade school, that is LCM. So we will now consider 4 and 8. So by the way, why are we finding the LCD? Because our goal here is to make sure that we will be able to write 1/4 and 1/8 to its equivalent fractions so that both of them will become like fractions. So we're trying to transform the two fractions so that they will have the same denominators. But still, we're still dealing with the same number, 1/4 and 1/8. So, going back, 4 and 8, you need to find the factors of 4. If you notice, 4 is 4 times 2. And 8 is, 4 is 4 times 1, and 8 is 4 times 2. If you notice, they have a common factor already, which is 4. So that means the LCD here is just 4 we bring this down, and then we bring this down as well, 2. So the LCD is 8. So the goal here is to make sure that both of the two fractions will have a denominator of 8. Notice that in the second fraction, it's already 8. That means that we don't have to do anything. But for the first fraction, to get an 8 as an LCD, we need to multiply it 2. Whatever you do in the denominator, you do it also in the numerator. Because 2 over 2 is just 1. So 1/4 times 1 is just 1/4. So we're just trying to really write it to its equivalent fraction. So we did not change its value. So 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Then there you go. So you can see they have the same denominator already. Therefore, you can just copy the common denominator and then 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1, 1/8. Now, our answer as of the meantime is 1/8. But remember, the last step is to copy the sign of the larger number. Looking at our situation, the absolute value of 1/4, of negative 1/4 is 1/4, and the absolute value of 1/8 is 1/8. If you compare them, 1/4 is greater than 1/8. So that's why we need to copy the sign for 1/4, which is originally negative. So our final answer here is negative 1/8. Okay, so now, what if the operation is subtraction? So just a quick review, subtracting numbers is just the same as adding its opposite. So we just change the subtraction problem to addition, and then we follow the rules for adding positive and negative numbers. So this is now again our example. We have 7/10 minus negative 3/10. So first, what we need to do is to make sure that the given now, we change it to addition. But remember, subtracting is just the same as adding its opposite. So, the given 7/10 minus negative 3/10 will now become 7/10 plus the opposite of negative 3/10 is just positive 3/10. Then, you will notice that both numbers are positive, so we follow the first rule in adding numbers. And since they have the same denominator, we just add by copying the common denominator and by adding the numerators. 7 plus 3 is 10. Then copy the denominator 10. But 10 divided by 10 is just 1. And again, both numbers are positive. So that means our final answer is 1. Let's now continue with another example. Let's say you have negative 1/3 minus 2/5. So now, the same thing, negative 1/3 minus 2/5. Change subtraction to addition. Copy negative 1/3. Change the sign, the operation from subtraction to addition, and then this is positive 2/5 So it will now become negative 2/5. Now they have the same sign, negative, negative. So all you need to do is to get the absolute value of negative 1/3 plus the absolute value of negative 2/5. The absolute value of negative 1/3 is 1/3. The absolute value of negative 2/5 is 2/5. Okay, now they have different denominators, so that means you still have to find the LCD. Now, in terms of 3 and 5, 3 is just 3 times 1, and 5 is just 5 times 1. That means bring it down, bring down, bring down. 3 times 1 times 5 is 15. So it's expected that both numbers will become, the denominators will become 15. So what will we multiply to the denominator 3 to make it 15? That would be 5. And you do the same thing in the numerator. Plus 2/5. We need to multiply what number to get 15 if we have 5? That would be 3. So 1 times 5 is 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Then 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 3 is 15. So they have the same denominator already. So add the numerators. 5 plus 6 over 15. And 5 plus 6 and 5 plus 6 is what? 11. Okay, now 5 plus 6 is 11 over 15. Okay, now how about the sign? What will be the sign now? So going back to our given where it's already addition, if you compare the absolute value of these two numbers, no need because they have the same sign. They're both negative. That means our final answer, we just have to copy the common sign, which is negative, and then 11 over 15. So there you go. Negative 1/3 minus 2/5 is equal to negative 11 over 15.